Good evening, everyone, and welcome to session 4 of the QJA virtual conference. The theme for this conference is diversity in our community, and tonight we have some wonderful speakers for you to continue on that theme. And tonight's topic is on connecting the community for a strong community. I would like to express a really warm welcome to our members joining us from around Queensland, from North Queensland, Central Queensland, the Fraser Coast, Western Queensland, the Gold and Sunshine Coast, and the Brisbane metropolitan area. You're on a webinar tonight, so that's why if you are in the audience, you can't see yourself and your microphone is muted. If you have any questions for our speakers, please ask them in the Q&A, and any chat is just for general comments. So comments in the chat and questions in the Q&A. Following tonight's session, we'll have a survey that will be emailed to you. So do please complete the survey that lets us know how we go and how we can improve on sessions in the future. So I'd also like to begin tonight by acknowledging and paying my respects to the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we meet, the elders past, present and emerging. We've had a slight change of program tonight, so we previously believed that we were not going to hear from the Shadow Attorney General, but I have received his recording, so I will put that on now.
Well, thank you to President Brooke Batley and Vice President Eddie Fraser for the invitation to join you for the conference this year, and also to Wendy Lamacchia for organising my attendance by video. Now, last year we had a good discussion about the history of Justices of the Peace and the evolution of the responsibilities of Justices of the Peace and their standing and role in community. Of course, understanding and acknowledging where you come from is important to know, as it explains where you currently are and perhaps gives some insight into where you are likely to go in the future. And it's the future that I'd like to say a few words about this evening. And I'm also conscious that this is the last session of your 4-day conference marathon and that it's 6 p.m. So I won't keep you away from the footy, the news, or importantly, dinner and drinks for too long. Now, in this fast-paced digital era, your roles extend beyond the traditional responsibilities of witnessing documents or administering oaths. Instead, you embody the spirit of service and community. Your work goes far beyond the courts, and it reaches into the very heart of our neighbourhoods and our workplaces. You are the trusted advisors, the familiar faces, the comforting presence in times of need. Serving as a Justice of the Peace is a commitment that goes beyond your professional duties, tapping into your personal time and energy. And a commitment to this service and willingness to volunteer your time and expertise is, of course, not without its own benefits. In fulfilling this role, I'm sure many of you have found a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose, and a sense of realising your potential. And these are deeply human needs, as fundamental as the principles of fairness and justice that you have sworn to uphold. Serving others can act as a potent antidote to the sense of dislocation, tragically so common in the 21st century. It's an act of giving, but also a means of receiving fulfilment. Moreover, your service is a beacon of stability in a society that seems to be retreating from volunteering. Through your work, you foster social cohesion, embody the principles of justice and fairness, and live out these values in your everyday actions. And I've heard as well from people like Cameron Crook, who I recently presented an award for 25 years of service as a JP, that your service also creates opportunities for personal growth and development. It can help to keep you mentally and physically active. It can enhance your social and communication skills, and it can even pave the way for new opportunities and careers, fostering positive perceptions of your character, skills, motivation, and initiative. In a world where screens and physical distance, like tonight, can make us feel isolated, Your role is more crucial than ever. As justices of the peace, you continue to foster personal connections in our society. You are the weavers of our community bonds, the torchbearers of justice and fairness, and the change makers referred to in the theme of this year's National Volunteer Week. And as we face the challenges and uncertainties of the future, and there are many, it's important we remember your role and the impact that you can make. So thank you for dedicating your time, for connecting our communities, for upholding the principles of justice and fairness, and for serving our community as beacons of stability and trust. My door will always be open to the Queensland Justices Association and to Justices of the Peace. Thank you and enjoy the conference.
Very nice words from the Shadow Attorney General, Tim Nicholls there, which I think he puts it very, very well as to what our role is. So as I said earlier, just bear with me for a sec. As I said earlier, the theme of tonight's conference is connecting. So connecting through our community makes us strong and robust and resilient. Our first speaker tonight is Lesley Bennett. Lesley is an international community development program manager specialising in the design and delivery of targeted multi-sectoral community development programs. A recent permanent migrant to Australia in 2019, almost all of Lesley's career has taken place outside Australia and predominantly in Papua New Guinea, where she originally comes from. After graduating with a social science degree from RMIT, she returned to Papua New Guinea and worked with the Nature Conservancy, the World Wildlife Fund in Biodiversity and Conservation, the Australian Aid Program and civil society organisations, with women and youth groups and churches, community groups in governance and funding applications. Lesley won an award for her work with the World Bank. And the Papua New Guinea Women in Mining and Petroleum Program. Lesley migrated back to Australia in 2019 and has held various community development roles in the social service sector. Her passions include mentoring, exploring employment pathways for people from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds, and would like to know more about starting a social enterprise that will support health, education and entrepreneurial projects back in her home country of Papua New Guinea. Over to you, Lesley.
Thank you, Wendy. Now I just have to share my screen. Okay, here's this. Show and there. Okay. All right. Good evening, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the ethnic ECCQ, I would also like to acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples of this state and nation. And ECCQ acknowledges the traditional owners of the lands on which we meet today, the Turrbal and Yagra people. We pay respects to the ancestors and elders, past, present, and future. And we honor Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people's unique culture and spiritual connection to the land, water, and seas, and their contribution to enriching Queensland and Australia's communities. I would like to, first of all, thank Queensland Justices Association for the kind invitation to speak at the Multicultural Conference. My presentation is actually a hybrid because although I represent my employer, ECCQ, I'm actually going to talk about my work back home in PNG. In my years as a grassroots community development practitioner, I have had the opportunity to trial and test textbook theory, as well as the more exciting and operational aspects of international development, which fuels my passion. And I hope that by the end of the presentation, you will have a better appreciation of the challenges of applying a place-based approach to community development in a country such as PNG, where this approach proves complex and often misunderstood by donors whose projects are designed outside of PNG. As the title slide states, I'm Lesley Bennett. I come from the northeastern part of PNG, from a district named Finschhafen by German Lutheran missionaries in the mid-1800s. Prior to their arrival, we had our own place name. My village is on the sea. My people are mostly subsistence farmers, fishermen, and renowned seafarers. People from my village have limited income earning opportunities, and most people rely on remittances from working relatives in PNG and abroad. Now, you may be wondering about the significance of this information, but for a country with over 800 languages, one of the fastest rates of population growth in the world, the highest rate of illiteracy in the Pacific, among the highest rates of infant and maternal mortality, malnutrition, stunting, crime, family and domestic violence, and unemployment in the region, it is important to understand the context of working in this sector as a Papua New Guinean woman in a male-preferred culture. Not to mention working in some of the most remote parts of the country and most harshest and challenging environments in the world. When George Floyd died in May 2020 after being handcuffed and pinned to the ground by Minneapolis police officers, we witnessed globally a movement making it clear that Black voices were demanding to be heard. And for too long, our institutions had not been listening. For those of us working in or that have worked in the international development space, we should take a moment to reflect and ask ourselves if we are truly listening to this global movement and are doing all we can to ensure that the Black Lives Matter message is reflected in our work and the programs we implement. This means more than community consultations and place-based approaches. It means empowering local people in the design and delivery of aid programs, creating the space for national experts to unleash their imagination and innovation, and to bring their expertise and experience to leadership roles. During COVID-19, with many unable to leave the country, state, city, or perhaps living rooms, the international development sector was pushed to use every tool available to deliver programs thousands of kilometers away. From Australia, we came to see the roles that needed an expatriate or consultant on the ground, and those that do not, of which were more than we know, than we thought. The COVID-19 lockdown had provided some space for nationals of partner countries from the Pacific to take more leadership, But was that achieved? A rapid adoption of technology across the international development sector meant that countries in the Pacific, including PNG, relied on Australia to continue program leadership and decision-making. Our capacity to work remotely meant that generally we had not relied on national experts to take the lead and continue programs in the region. If a disruption the size of COVID-19 did not force us to change our approach, then it is clear the status quo will be maintained unless we choose otherwise. Another example of the need for country-level leadership is when Tropical Cyclone Harold hit the region during the COVID-19 pandemic. Expatriates could not fly in to help. This forced local communities, governments, and civil society groups to lead the response, accelerating the transition to localization in a way traditional development programs have not been required to. Sorry. Nurturing place-based community development usually begins at the more resourced corporate level, with those established organizations with the wherewithal to facilitate large-scale donor-driven programs. One such institution in PNG is the PNG Chamber of Mines and Petroleum, where I worked for 9 years as program manager of the World Bank Gender and Extractives Program, known in PNG as the PNG Women in Mining and Petroleum Program. Another such institution is the Australian Aid Program, which recognizes the importance of regional capacity building in the fight to eliminate gender-based violence in the Pacific, with regular capacity building and upskilling of subject matter experts in the region. The top right photo represents women from the Pacific Island countries meeting at Parliament House in Canberra. The bottom slide shows students from the PNG University of Technology registering to attend the Chamber's annual 2-day Community Relations and Business Development Conference. This event gives companies the opportunity to headhunt and for students to meet potential employers. In stark contrast, place-based community development starts at ground zero in rural and remote PNG. This slide illustrates the target groups that many international development projects are sent to work with. Oh, sorry. Just beg your pardon, just bear with me, sorry. Sorry, I'll start again. This next slide, in stark contrast, place-based community development starts at ground zero in rural and remote PNG. And this slide illustrates the target groups that many international development projects are sent to work. But these three photos are my work that I was working with for the 9 years. Faced with insurmountable challenges such as geographical isolation, language barriers, tribal conflict, I have proven in my work that there are fundamental, universally practiced principles that promise to bring the place-based development so drastically needed in the communities. One is perseverance, a lot of muscle, and a can-do attitude. These are the active ingredients, some of the active ingredients. Sensitivity and an appreciation of different customs and cultures. In PNG, my work worked in the highlands, right in the central part of Papua New Guinea, to the coastal parts where you can, in the middle photo there, that's a coastal area in the New Island province. And on the right-hand side is another culture from the highlands. So working in this sector, you need to you need to be sensitive to the different, the diversity of culture and the people. You need to build trust and to be inclusive. Here on the right, you'll see that most, even though it was a women-led project, we did also have a lot of interest from men who wanted to learn some of the life skilling. Inclusive means that if, you know, we partnered with churches, we partnered with villages, and even if we tried to include mothers who had children to attend some of this training and capacity building. In international development, you show empathy, not sympathy. People here, they have skills, they just need help to refine and to learn how they can use or market those skills and monetize those skills that they have. A lot of times in international development, I like to call it the last frontier syndrome. A lot of times, you know, when people go international development, people go to countries such as PNG or other developing countries, they tend to have this, you know, last frontier. Well, actually, they're really not last frontier because people have been living there for eons and, you know, many years. And the challenge, we need to learn how to work with these people. Good community development is about getting to know the context that you'll be working in. You need to have know what the demographics are. Are there, you know, are there schools? Are there hospitals? What, you know, other people? How do they earn their income? Do they have opportunities to earn income? Yeah, and know the cultures. This the picture in the middle, you might think that it's a Borneo longhouse. It's actually in Papua New Guinea. It's in a region that's called Lake Kutubu. And then also, I like the picture of the Coke and the cucumbers because this to me illustrates a struggle with a different time. Like you have the traditional foods and vegetables, and then you have the Coke and all the the Western food that's being introduced. And it's about how to have a balance. Development, community-based, place-based development is about cultivating and strengthening alliances. Get to know which communities, which organizations in the area that you're operating in. Build your partnerships and build good relationships with them, because you can always support and dovetail on each other's work. As a practitioner, it's always important to understand your role in the community. What is your role? How do the people in the villages perceive you? A lot of times people can tell whether you are genuinely interested in their well-being, and they will build a trust and rapport with you. So it's about understanding your role as a host in their community, and not to promise what you can't give, but to be realistic about what you can do for them. And last of all, it's to be prepared for the long haul. And by this, I mean that with the dire case of human development statistics that I read out earlier, life for almost all rural Papua New Guineans is a daily struggle. With the priority focusing on meeting immediate everyday needs, the notion of collective problem solving remains low on the scale of importance. For the majority of rural Papua New Guineans whose only form of contact outside of their homes has been restricted to immediate family and clan and tribal members, place-based community development is not something that, like developed countries, can be discussed at the weekly town hall meeting. Rather, place-based community development will be applied for community development when all the principles that have been discussed are fully understood and implemented by both practitioner and the host communities. So it is advisable to be prepared for the long haul. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Lesley. And I particularly like your image of the guys pushing the vehicle in the mud, which really kind of really illustrates that can-do attitude, doesn't it? So, yeah, some great insights there into community development in places like country Papua New Guinea. So thank you very much for that. And to the audience, by all means, if you have any questions from any of our presenters, do ask them as we go. Our next speaker is Dragana Pahulu. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Just nod if I know. Right, awesome. Great. Dragana has been working at Multilink Community Services for the past 13 years, starting her career at Multilink as a volunteer. During this time, she has worked across different positions, and in her current role is the Community Connect worker, supporting vulnerable individuals and families in the local community to navigate support services through direct support, access to information, and referral pathways. Dragana is experienced in working with and engaging with people from diverse cultural, linguistic, and faith backgrounds, and has a passion for working with and connecting community. She has extensive knowledge and experience in supporting community, linking with and making connections with service providers, delivering financial wellbeing services, including emergency relief support and no-interest loan schemes, and continues to focus on building individual and community capability, working from a strengths base to help people to find themselves. Over to you, Dragana.
Thank you so much, Wendy. And Lesley, you're a very hard act to follow after your presentation. Thank you very much for inviting me tonight to have a chat to all of you guys about a little bit about our service. And I thought I would also touch on our partnership with the Department of Justice, the Attorney General, and the Queensland Justices Association. First, I'm just going to share my screen. Hopefully everything works as it should. now. All right. Hopefully that's gone through okay to all of you. So as Wendy said, so my name is Dragana Paulu, and I'm the Community Connect Worker at Multilink Community Services. Wendy, you did a really great job of pronouncing my name as well, so I appreciate that. So just a little bit of background about me. I am Serbian, of Serbian background. My surname is Tongan because my husband is Tongan. And we've been in Australia since 1995. So I was very young when I came to Australia. Very blessed and very lucky to be in this country and to share some of the experiences that a lot of our clients are experiencing coming into a new country as well. So before I start off with my presentation, I just wanted to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet. Where I'm based, we're in Yagara and Yugabear country. So I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend that acknowledgement also to any of our First Nations leaders who are online with us tonight as well. So just a little bit about Multilink Community Services. So we're a multicultural specialist neighbourhood and community centre, and our main office is based in Logan Central. Even though our main office is based in Logan Central, our services do extend to 7 local government areas across southeast Queensland, and depending on which service you're accessing at Multilink will depend on the catchment area that we cover. We support in excess of 9,000 individuals annually through all of our programs and services, and our clients come from a range of different backgrounds. So we do provide mainstream support for clients as well. We have many people from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander backgrounds, and also clients from migrant and refugee backgrounds coming from over 170 different diverse cultural, faith, linguistic backgrounds as well. So some of the services that we currently provide at Multilink are employment and training. We're also funded through the NDIA to deliver the NDIS program. We do aged care for over 65s, community care for people under 65 years of age. We have financial wellbeing programs, our neighbourhood centre program, community action for a multicultural society, our community connect worker program, youth and also refugee settlement. So we do support people across quite a different number of service areas and programs. So just a little bit about what I'll be presenting about tonight. So in 2021, Multilink was approached by the Department of Justice and Attorney General to partner with them to deliver their CALD engagement strategy as a partner in Logan. So through this engagement strategy, it was to enable the Justice of the Peace branch to respond to community expectations and provide support around cultural diversity internally and externally. So this strategy also aligns with the Queensland government policies, so the multicultural policy, the action plan, the Recognition Act, and also the Justice of the Peace branch's strategic plan 2020-2024. So that's sort of how we fit. And the way that Multilink has been part of this partnership is through the professional development. So when this plan was launched, we actually did a presentation at a morning tea that was launching the strategy, and it was about cultural sensitivities and responsiveness. In addition to this, we also one of the key priority areas was partnering with and supporting CALD community groups and service providers. So we support the Justice of the Peace branch through delivering services using our joint resources. So the Justice of the Peace branch provides us with JPs who are based at our centre, and we provide all of the support. So we provide the space for them to see clients from. We also provide language and cultural support where needed through our use of staff members that work in the centre, and anything else that's needed, whether that's photocopying documents or any other services or support that's needed. So the service actually commenced in May 2021 at Multilink and was delivered every Tuesday. So this year we actually expanded the service to Thursday as well. So now we do Tuesdays and Thursdays. We have 3 Justices of the Peace that provide this service to our community from our centre. And as you know, it's a walk-in service, but we have, in addition to the community members who access this program, we also have our own clients who we support into the JP program. And the way that we do this is we provide language and cultural support. So many of the clients that we see don't have English as a first language. Some of them are actually illiterate in their own language. So our staff will provide them with that support to access the service. And as you can appreciate, for a lot of people, depending on what country they've come from, when they hear anything about government services or legal documents, anything like that, people tend not to access the service because there's no trust there. So our staff actually provide that additional layer of trust and rapport to accessing the service. And that's it. That's it from me. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to take them or happy to take them afterwards.
Thanks, Dragana. Your PowerPoint wasn't moving. Was that intentional?
Oh, really? Oh, it was moving on my end, but it might not have been moving from on your side. It was moving on my side, so I apologize for that.
Okay, no problem. If it's convenient, if you could send through a copy of your PowerPoint, I can send that on to the audience so they can see the slides. So
I will definitely.
Yeah, interesting that you have JPs. You have a JP service in the community centre. So where are they located?
So we're located in our centre is in Logan Central. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the area. So we have a room that's a dedicated space for our JPs. And because our centre is close to train station and bus station as well, it's easily accessible. We also have a lot of the services that are based around our organisation. They refer their clients in to access the service as well. So we're very well connected where we are.
So that's just Logan Central? Do you have other community centres around Brisbane?
We don't, unfortunately. So that's our main office, but the services extend out across the southeast. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So what kind of documents would your clients be getting? Aside from the people that just walk in there, what kind of documents would someone that is a client of yours need to have witnessed by a JP?
So recently we've had a few enduring power of attorney documents, the standard witnessing documents, so your driver's license, identification cards, etc. We've also had birth certificates as well, so the translated versions and their own in-language versions. We've also had statutory declarations that clients have had to do as well. We've had many of those because of the lack of documentation that they have available as well. Yeah, just to name a few.
Yeah. Sounds like kind of the normal stuff. Really, nothing particularly special, but yeah, I suppose a lot of translated documents. So
yeah, it's also the sometimes when you tell a client you need to see a JP, they think it's a GP. So we're always having to tell them, no, it's not your GP, it's a JP. JP means this and your GP means that. So you can't take these documents to your GP to sign. You have to come and see a JP.
It's interesting actually, because just last week, one of our volunteers was on our desk here in the office, and this gentleman came in and he sat down and he said, I've had this really sore back for a couple of days. But the other way too.
You came to see the wrong person.
Yeah. Something got lost in it if you're part of the translation. So, so it happens that way too. So thank you very much for that. We don't have any questions at the moment. We'll chat, but yeah, if you could send through maybe your PowerPoint, even if it's a PDF version, so that our audience can see the slides. Yeah, it's like one of those technical glitches that happen.
Yeah, it was moving fine on my end, so I thought everything was going okay, but
yeah, it's like one of those stressy technological things. Yeah. Thanks again for that. All right, so our next speaker is Corey Monahan, who is the Deputy Group Leader with the Queensland SES and is based in Brisbane. So in addition to normal operations, operations for the SES are things like, which you'll be familiar with, storm damage, putting tarpaulins on roofs and such, working with heights, chainsaw and land search requests, and a request for assistance. Corey has also taken part in numerous operations on the front line, including Cyclone Yazzie in 2017, the Southeast Queensland bushfires in 2019, the Port Macquarie floods in 2021, the support of the COVID response, so that's airport and testing checks, and the Brisbane floods in 2022. So you've been very busy, Corey. Corey is a very active member of the Queensland SES, and he has volunteered over 1,700 hours of his time to build resiliency and support communities in a time of need. Corey is an active volunteer community educator and is often sought out to assist people prepare for storm season, how to respond in emergency, and how to recover and build resiliency post-emergency. In his day job, he is a member of the QUT senior staff and helps teach its MBA program. Corey holds a master's degree in business and engineering and is an AICD, an IPM member and a fellow of IML. So AICD is the Australian Institute of Public Directors. IPM, I believe, is the Institute of Project Managers. And IML is the Institute of Managers and Leaders, formerly known as the Australian Institute of Management. So over to you, Corey.
Yeah, sorry, that's a very long bio. I apologise for boring the members. But I do thank them for inviting me here today to talk to you about all things recovering from a disaster. Before I get into it, I would like to again probably say I am focusing very much around the recovery of the disaster. I've taken obviously, given it is a Queensland Association of JPs that I'm talking to, I've taken a Queensland-wide approach. I haven't just focused on stuff the SES do either. I'm equally interested in other related emergencies like fires. I'll talk to that. Where I have had to illustrate with examples, then I've used my councils. But I would encourage you, for those of you that are living in some of the many areas that Wendy just highlighted, to get across what your councils are doing locally. I'm going to explain why in a second. All right, I might just try and share my screen, see how we go here, and please yell if we do have technical difficulties. Can everyone see the full screen? I'm just going to wait for Wendy to nod.
Yep, sure can.
Right. Okay, so we in the Queensland Fire and Emergency Service, like many other organisations, are very focused on, I don't know why it's not, there we go, recognise the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people. In my case, that's the Yagara and Turrbal people as the traditional owners of the land in which I'm giving this presentation. So I too would like to, as other presenters have done, pay my respects to elders past, present, emerging. I'd also like to pay special recognition to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who may be joining us today, and hopefully, and I'm sure they are well represented in the JP community. I thought I'd also make special connection, given the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders connection to country is so important given today's topic. They have been the custodians of the lands and the sea for thousands of years, continue to do so. And I thought it was really important to highlight as we deal with things like emergencies and disaster recovery that we recognise that our First Peoples of Australia have been dealing with that for years. And in fact, many of us have learnt from them. So I would like to pay particular thanks to our members of our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities around that. Okay, so my aim today, if I'm successful, and please let me know if I'm not via questions, is to do the following. Now, it's a little bit tricky just to talk about disasters, recovery following a disaster, if I don't talk about the best thing you can do to support recovery, which is actually deal with it in the first place. But before I launch into that, I just wanted to give you an idea about who across the state is responsible for all things disaster recovery. A little bit of a slide there, really, that just talks about the disaster recovery arrangements. If you're really interested in that, you can click on that and I'll send these slides through so you can have all of this. I've got references at the back as well. So I'll send that all through to Wendy so she'll have it there available to you. But by and large, it's your local council. They have the first primary responsibility for anything to do with disaster management, including recovery. The state has recently introduced, as you may or may not be aware, the Queensland Reconstruction Authority. Now, that was set up under, funny enough, the Queensland Reconstruction Authority Act in 2011, following the 2011 floods and other related disasters. And so it has responsibility for leading statewide policy, as I say there on the right-hand side. So QRA is going from strength to strength, and they've got a lot of materials on their site too around the topic we're just talking about. So obviously want to talk about disaster recovery. People have different definitions and understanding what disasters mean and the various phases of disasters. Key thing for us is getting ready for one in the first place. We know that with climate change and other things, that prevention preparedness is a must. Disasters happen, are continuing to happen, and will continue to happen regardless. It might be fires, it might be floods, or it might be cyclones, as we quite often get up north, and anything in between. So there is the formal definition for those of you that that way inclined around what a disaster recovery activity actually is and constrains. Probably the key there for me, realistically, is that in fact it's about the full restoration, not just what people might think, which is traditional infrastructure. So it also talks about restoration of the environment and other social and other gatherings, so that effectively you can be as close to back to where you were prior to the disaster as you are. Okay, I must talk about prevention and preparedness, because this is the way to recover the best from any disaster. I also think this is an area where JPs have a particular role to play, particularly when we get to the emergency kit. So they are the three things that we recommend, whether you speak to councils, whether you speak to Queensland Risk Association, or you speak to people like me in the State Emergency Service, or my brothers and sisters in other services under the Queensland Fire and Emergency Service umbrella. First, understand your risk. 2, prepare a plan. And then 3, have an emergency kit. The emergency kit one, I'll just focus on a little bit right now. That includes things like your records, your key records. Don't assume that just because you've backed it up, it's recoverable in the cloud. Please don't do that. Please take it, and it's always good to have a certified true copy and have them in separate places, and have them ideally away from you in another location, like at your your next of kin's place, or if the next of kin's with you, then maybe your closest family relative, or so on and so forth. Always very useful, because when it comes to insurance time and getting your identity back, if it does happen in an emergency and you have had to flee very, very quickly and a flood of fires wiped out your stuff, then those things have become really, really, really important, particularly to get your life back. So I'll just jump briefly into the different parts of the risk. The first thing I need to make you aware of is there's now a national-wide system to alert people about whether they should be worried or not. And I've put the exclamation mark, which is the general one, in there, but you'll quite often, if you're up north, for example, and you're a JP, you'll see the little cyclone pictures. If you're out west, you're more prone to fires, you may see the fire pictures. And for all of us that live on the eastern seaboard or anywhere near a river, you'll see little flood pictures. Doesn't really matter. The key there is you've gone from your, effectively yellow, orange, and red. And it just gives you an idea, really, whether you sort of just need to start doing those things I spoke about, getting your pack together, making sure you know where to go, revising your plan, all that sort of stuff, or whether you're actually really now unpacking the car and working out exactly where I'm going. I know what I'm going to do. I know if I've got to flee, where the nearest centre is or community location is. And then, of course, during the emergency, it's almost too late. So you're really then working about, well, what am I going to do? Because it's here. So again, if you're interested in any more of that, I have provided the reference in the website. The other important places, if you want to understand what's going on, and again, I apologise for those of you that may not be in Brisbane, but I have included the statewide one, which is the one on the right. So that's from the Department of Resources. So you can put any address in Queensland in, and it'll tell you, and you can add filters or not add filters around what you're likely to do in terms of flooding. And of course, councils themselves have special awareness, flood awareness maps. Not all councils, because not all councils are resourced quite to the extent that we are. But you should have a very, very good idea before you buy a property, before you rent a property, whether you're in a flood zone. And there's lots of resources out there to help you do that. And that's probably the main thing I wanted to speak about with that slide. Same with fire. So again, I've just searched on where my group is, which is actually in Taringa. So I've just put the search in there, and it's identifying for me what the fire risk is for me. And Mount Cootha is where I do unfortunately a lot of our land searches, for example, and we know that has a reasonable risk of fire, and so we need to be prepared for that. You'll also notice there again, you will see those fire rating systems that are available to you, again, to just talk about what you need to do if there is a fire, so you can plan for it. Okay, I'd now like to talk about the plan a little bit. So we now have identified whether we're in a risky area, and this is really, really, really the important bit. Because when push comes to shove, your quick understanding of this and knowing what it is will keep you safe and also help with recovery. So I'll put a few dot points in there for people that are interested. And again, I'm not here to tell you whether to leave or to stay. You assess your risks, but have a plan nevertheless. Importantly, know what to do with any pets. The amount of times I've gone to pick up somebody and they don't know what they've done with their pets, and unfortunately their pets are there, and we've got to give priority to people. So It's important you understand what you're going to do with pets. We spoke about packing a box, staying informed, have insurance, and know what it covers. I can't probably understate that one enough, particularly given, unfortunately, a lot of people found out the hard way whether their insurance did or didn't cover it. And of course, we know the costs of insurance are increasing, particularly for those areas where risks are higher. And I feel deeply sorry for a number of those people. I found that in Port Macquarie quite sad. Okay, there is a lot of the other two things with the diagrams is there's statewide stuff there that's available to you if you don't know what a plan should be. It's easily available. It's in the references I've provided, and it just walks you through the types of things you might want to consider. I particularly like the one on the left because it's an overall one. It doesn't really matter the type, but then we do have specific ones for bush or flood, depending on whether you're there. And all of those things talk about the stuff that I've just spoken about. So take the time. Again, I know you want to talk about recovery, so I just wanted to highlight to you, this is really, really important because it goes to your recovery. If you've got your marriage certificate or copies of it, if you've got your birth certificate of copies of it, it's so much easier to reestablish your connection with life. During disasters, again, didn't want to focus on this. I could have lots of pictures here, which might be interesting, but not really germane to the point. But I just wanted to make sure that people understood when they go out and talk to others that there are a number of different environments that people can call and ways that information has got out to you. The local radio station is probably the one that's probably the most used. And again, if you think you're in danger, always call 000. Or if you are impaired in any way, then you can use sight impaired, then you can use 106 and those types of things. And messages will come through, including in tunnels and other places via that number. So don't block it. Don't think it's spam. Last thing I really want to talk to you about during a disaster is, again, this will help a little bit with recovery. It also makes it really important for you, is that you really want to understand, have a look at what's going on during the disaster. So is the river coming up? Is the fire coming your way? So you know how to keep yourself safe or your community safe. You can see some additional numbers there. The community recovery hotline is a very useful one post, and I'll reinforce that, post-disaster, but it's also there for information. Please do not wait until the last minute to evacuate. I've had that happen to me in 2022, and we had people there up to their chest in flood water wading through it, and that's not a very healthy way to be, and it's also very dangerous for you and for your rescuers. Stay off the roads if you can. Take your bag of goodies if you haven't already. This is the other one. Even if it's a fire or flood, please secure your residence, because otherwise your identity might be nicked, your stuff might be nicked, and nothing's worse. I mean, you're coming home to a trashed house, but then if your precious items are also stolen, that can be truly heartbreaking. And people, unfortunately, we're not all law-abiding citizens, and people do that during a disaster. Yeah, I think there's a special place in hell for them, but anyway, that does happen. So there is the link to the dashboards and the types of things that it does. Okay, probably to the main event, Wendy, if you can bear with me for a minute, is the key thing I like to talk about disaster recovery is it can be very, very frustrating because it can take a long time, particularly if you're waiting on insurance companies and everyone's building or repairing houses at the same time. It can take a very, very long time. Whilst initial grants might be funding, for example, a small amount of money, if people are then waiting on larger grants or other stuff to help them recover, that can also take a long time. So there's a real role for some of those things that I was speaking about there, particularly when I get into mental health and some of those other things. I really like the materials that the Australian Red Cross have, so I've included the link to that. It's a really, really good thing because it talks about how to cope from a crisis. So you'll be able to click on that, and it's got a lot more material than I can speak to you in a 10 to 15 minute presentation. So I'd just say, if you get a chance and you are interested, then please jump into there and have a good look. If you are returning to a place after a disaster, and be prepared for the shock, but please do not enter or do anything around your property unless you've been told it's safe to do so. The amount of people that come home, first thing they might do is turn the power on, and then would potentially risk electrocution. So it's very, very important. The other thing is in flood weather. I mean, every time I've gone and done a flood event, after all the hype's worn down, I can guarantee I'm going to be in bed for the next 2 days, or running to the bathroom, because you get very, very sick playing in flood water. Lots of fuels, chemicals, food, sewage, and of course lots of things like that. So stay out of flood water, please. Ash goes everywhere in the event of a fire, so you can have respiratory conditions. So just be very, very careful when you're cleaning up. And also note that you're sometimes not alone. Critters try and find high spots. So if you are then cleaning a house and it's been subject to a flood, it's not uncommon, for example, when I was out in the flood boat, for a little snake to hatch a ride because they just want to get out of the water too. So just be really, really careful, take breaks, and if you need mental support or you need a break, take it, please. And I'll talk to you about some of those services there. Other people find when they get home it's too much, they need additional temporary accommodation. So if you're presented with that through somebody comes to you, then there is places they can go, and call. All right, and this is really where organisations, hopefully your organisation's played a role in the preventative piece, but this is also where organisations like yours and others come into play. During post a disaster, apart from firing hoses, cleaning out firehouses, the emergency services tends to step back a little bit. Yes, you'll find people like me out, helping clean up and stuff like that. But once that's done, we're then responding back to emergency situations. But a lot of people then might feel isolated because there's a lot of hype and interest during a flood or fire event for everyone to get in and help and go and go and go and go. But the reality is at some point, all of those people are going to leave and you're going to be left there. So it's really, really important that during that event that you consider your medical services that are available, including telehealth. There's mental health services available by some brilliant volunteers as well as professional counsellors who do some really good work there. Lots of pipelines. The last one this one is really, really sad and really, really important. During disasters, let me just say, family disputes can often get out of control. So you're more likely to be prone to domestic violence or other related violence during those events, because there's a lot of pressure on everybody involved. That's not an excuse for domestic violence. There never is, but we'll always see more of that. So it's important for those of you that may be subject to, or your people you deal with that may be subject to domestic violence, to have access to appropriate help and care. And if this triggers you, then please also reach out to some of the information providers that I've mentioned before. We also have a lot of refugee-related services around there. We've got some great community leaders. I think we've just heard from a couple of them. Please leverage those. During the 2022 floods, for example, even just food that was appropriate for people, halal food, things like that, making that available at some of the refuge centres was really, really important. And that was heavily driven by our refugee-related services and community groups. And I really, really thought that was really well done, and they do a great job. Some of those others are a little bit more normal, but people never know that to remember to bring them until they think about it. So your normal government services, communication, Optus, Telstra, etc., Energy, Ergon, those sort of things, those providers. I've spoken about that. You can also get support for temporary goods or other goods through some of those relief organisations. If you had to leave your animal, well, you might be lucky. You might find them there at the RSPCA. And the last one I'd probably talk about, besides the advocacy groups, which I think we were speaking about, is translation services. So again, even for our people where English is a second language, then there are translation services available to speak to any of the people above, and they do a great job. Now, I'd like to say again that everybody is useful, and landlords give tenants a break, and insurance companies always do the right thing by their people, and by and large they do. But sometimes you need a little bit of help from some of these people just to make sure that they are not subject to things that they shouldn't be subject to. In other words, they're treated fairly and equitably. So it's really important that people understand where they can go to get for help if they feel like they're banging their head against a brick wall. And so things like the Rental Tenancy Agency, the Insurance Council, Legal Aid and others. I mean, obviously you try and resolve at the local level first, but if you get nowhere, or the people that you're speaking to are getting nowhere, then there are legal and advocacy groups out there that can support their needs. Okay, I wanted to focus briefly then around, so again, there is financial support, both federally, which is the one on the right, and statewide, which is the one on the left. That's in addition. There are quite often community grants provided by NGOs and others. I'm just focusing on the people that have the most money, i.e. governments. So you can see there just snapshots from some screens, and it just talks about all the ways you can get support, including, I like it, even having support conversations with people around tax and tax deferment. So there are services around there for people that need money. As I said, quite often you'll get a little bit post disaster, but you really need more support over a sustained period, and you need to know where to go to get that. conscious of time, so I might just recap if I can. I put this last little slide in on the right because I like to point out an emergency. This sort of swings back to the first point, is now's not the time during an emergency or post-emergency. It's before an emergency where you've worked out what you're going to do, and it's a period of great distress, so don't start posting stuff on Facebook. But prepare, get insurance if you can, know what it covers, take the necessary steps, recognize that there's people like the community leaders talking today, there's people like me, there's people like those other agencies who really want to help, do care, and are available to you. So please take advantage of the services. If you're not sure and somebody else approaches you in your role as a GP, then, again, look at some of these sites that I'm going to provide you with. And if you're not sure or they're not sure, direct them to council as the first point of contact for the major events. And I will send this, and there's all the link to all of the various sites. There's a lot of them. The only other thing, though, is because I'm talking to a Queensland audience, a lot of the Brisbane City Council ones are only specific to Brisbane. So believe it or not, we do actually think that Queensland is broader than Brisbane for those of us that live here. We recognise all the great work done across our great state. So please check your local council websites and or offices to get additional information that might be pertinent to your local area. And that's really all I had, Wendy. But yes, more than happy for questions before I run away.
Sorry, there's no Q&A, so you must have presented the information really well. That's very informative. Thank you for that. Interesting that what you were saying about documents, and I suppose that's where, as JPs who certify stuff, we get a bit interested when someone starts talking about certified copies. Yeah, so it's a good idea. It is a good idea to have that documentation, have those copies that are not all in the one place, and maybe have them in your plastic crate as well. Because the first thing that's going to be asked usually when you're applying for a grant or anything like that is your ID, and that's it's sad to think that people have to leave home in a hurry and then they don't have any identification with them, and how difficult it must be for them to navigate through all of the stuff they need to navigate through. So a great services that are provided by the SES in terms of that community recovery, and certainly in tune with the theme of our conference, which is about the community and helping and connecting and rebuilding. That's absolutely fantastic. The SES.
Well, Wendy, can I just say thank you to you and the JPs for the work you do across the community. I don't know of one person that hasn't worked with a JP in their life, and so I don't think people understand the role necessarily as well as they should, and the credit to you all. So on behalf of myself, my family, and also the SES, a great thank you to the work that JPs do, so that when people do have a disaster, they actually have the documentation to back it up, and of course manage through their daily lives. So thank you very much for the invitation today.
Thank you, Corey. That was a great presentation. So Nicole, are you in the audience with us? Have you joined our panel? Just going to have a look. Oh, great. I can see Nicole on the screen. That's fantastic. All right. Okay, so our next speaker is our keynote speaker for the conference, and the organising committee felt it was very appropriate to end with a fabulous young woman like Nicole. Nicole is a proud Wiradjuri woman, serves as the Vice President of Purpose, People and Culture at Fujitsu Asia Pacific. She plays a lead role in supporting Fujitsu's people and customers to experience the company's purpose, and that is to make the world more sustainable by building trust in society through innovation. In her role, Nicole leads a team that collaborates across the business to practice Fujitsu's global values of trust, empathy, and aspiration to create an inclusive environment delivering sustainable impact. So joining Fujitsu in April 2021, Nicole has led the realisation of purpose in practice by championing I'm really having trouble with pronunciation tonight, and driving transformative changes across Fujitsu's sustainability, diversity, equity and inclusion and social impact programs. Fujitsu has signed its first renewable energy power purchase agreement, a gold award for the Australian Workplace Equity Index, and supported the Cherbourg Aboriginal community's digital transformation journey with its new service centre. Nicole brings to this role almost 2 decades of diverse leadership experience in Australia and across the Asia Pacific in government and international affairs. After graduating from the Queensland University of Technology, Nicole began her career by joining the Oodgeroo unit as an associate lecturer in Indigenous health and education. Over to you, Nicole.
Thank you, Wendy, for that very kind introduction. So first of all, I just wanted to do a quick sound check to make sure that you can hear me okay. Great, thank you. And I think I will share my screen now before I formally get started and share that. Make sure I'm in presentation mode. That might take a moment, sometimes it does. Ah, there we go, excellent. Right. Okay. Yama. Hello in the language of my Wiradjuri ancestors. Now, are you seeing my PowerPoint screen still?
Sorry, I keep getting on mute. Not the slideshow, we're seeing the other screen.
All right then, no worries. I will go back. I'm working on a single screen. I work for a technology company, so sometimes I get the technology right and sometimes I don't.
I'd say, because if you can't do it, then we're all struggling.
Okay, we can get there together.
Awesome.
So Yama, in the language of my Wiradjuri ancestors, let me say thank you and acknowledge that tonight I am joining you all from the lands of the Turrbal and Yagara people here. And I wish to acknowledge the neighbouring First Nations, so the Quandamooka to the east, the Waka Waka and the Kobi Kobi to the north, and the Yugambeh and the Bundjalung to the south. And I also wish to acknowledge my own Wiradjuri ancestors and as well as my European ancestors, the Scots and the British, who all together guide me to where I am today. And acknowledge the ongoing continuing cultural and community connections of First Nations peoples to their lands, which everyone is joining us from today. So thank you very much for the honour to be with you here to talk about our diverse community, connecting for a strong community together. As Wendy kindly introduced me, I am the Vice President for Purpose, People and Culture at Fujitsu in the Asia Pacific. I lead a division which is both the reason for being of the organisation and the people and culture for HR practice. And it's an honour to be able to share with you tonight the journey that we have been on as an organisation. To share with you our thinking about how we have been able to connect for a stronger community by really embracing what we call inclusion in our practice. It's one thing to have a diverse representation from the communities that you come from, but it is another thing to have to be able to make sure that people feel like they are included and to create a sense of belonging. And so today I'm going to be talking with you about the journey that Fujitsu has been on and perhaps help you think through as an organisation, as the Queensland the QJA, how these things might be relevant to your practice and what beyond the why. So often when people talk about diversity and inclusion, I tend to talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, or inclusion rather than diversity in and of itself, because the why is now pretty well known, and even some of the what. But tonight I want to share with you some of the how that we as an organisation have been focused on. I'll just move through slides. So I want to talk about how we can together share what inclusion looks like for people. So I want you to close your eyes and take a moment. I know that sounds an unusual thing to be doing on a video call, closing your eyes, but close your eyes, take a moment, center yourself in this space and this time. And I want you to think about and call forward some images of things that are, when I say these words to you, what comes into your mind? So imagine, what does a small business look like to you? What does a professor and a medical doctor look like? What does an Olympian look like? What does an author and national leader look like? What does a workplace look like? And what does a wedding look like? And as you are there thinking about these different words and what they mean to you, as you open your eyes, you'll see the screen in front of you. And I share these images as what the things that I think about when those words are called for me, and I think and imagine what those things are. And I want to talk through why these images perhaps could be different than the images that you were thinking of. We are all vessels of our own experience. And so when we think of what are the things that corner us and center us in our lives, the experiences that we've had and that we've seen. And so in the top left of your screen, you'll see a group of people who are the members of the Cherbourg Digital Technology Small Business. And you may not know many Aboriginal owned, run, managed and staffed small businesses, but this is a great example of one. On the right-hand side is Professor Noel Heyman. He is an Aboriginal medical doctor who is also a professor, and he was one of the earliest registered medical doctors in Queensland, and really has served his communities across Queensland in bringing to light the special opportunities of serving First Nations communities here, and what that can learn and teach us, not just from First Nations communities perspective, but for all people in society around when you listen to people, what a difference that makes. I asked you to recall of an Olympian. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Madison Rosario, but she has won 3 gold medals and 2 silvers across her multi-Olympic Games career as a Paralympian, and is an incredible inspiration as a human being. Dr. Jackie Huggins, a formidable Queensland First Nations woman who is working with the Queensland government on the current Path to Treaty working group and helping provide guidance to the Queensland government and Queensland society around what that path to treaty looks like. I asked you to think about what a current or a workplace looks like, and I included one of the photos from our Fujitsu work-life shift technology offerings, because there's a person sitting at a window looking out over a harbour with a laptop. I think all of us tonight understand how COVID has changed our way of being and doing and knowing, and that work is one of those places that has been transformed forever as we come to understand that geography is no longer a barrier to participation because of the digital transformation that our lives have had since we've lived through and survived the COVID pandemic. And finally, I asked you to think about what a wedding looks like. I think we live in a country that we're very lucky to recognise that love is love, and I really enjoy the different ways that that is being celebrated in the diversity of our communities, and wanted to share one of my favourite photos from a local Brisbane wedding celebrant that specialises in wedding celebrant services for people who are same-sex. So that's a very long way to introduce what we're going to be talking about tonight, which is really about how we can build stronger communities. And when I talk about communities, I'm not just talking about the communities where the QJA live and work and serve, so the community that you belong to as a part of Queensland, but also the QJA community itself. When I mentioned those words earlier about think about these images, now I'm going to ask you to think about what a QJA member looks like. So you're all members on this call. When you think about other members, what image comes to mind? And each of you will have your own version of what that image is, but I wanted to share this image because this is Daniel. Daniel was featured in your autumn 2023 QJA membership magazine, and his story that he shared in the magazine was such an inspiration to me that I thought that I would feature him tonight here to give you a great example of the diversity that is already included in your own membership and how important that diversity of perspective, of experience, of background and of thought, and why that's important for your organization. There was a quote that he had, and if you haven't read the article, I really commend it to you as not just something that you can learn from, but something that you can be inspired by. When there was a quote that he said that if there's something that you want to do, then just go out and ask if you can be involved. And I think for me, that quote really centers the way that we at Fujitsu are practicing our approach to inclusion. Often in previous iterations of work around diversity, people center themselves in their own space. And I think what Daniel's story really brought to the fore, where he shared his injury 22 years ago that left him being a paraplegic, was that his own experience has value. His diversity of thought and experience and background brings value to him in what he's doing now that he's finished his JP qualification course with the QJA, and that he brings value to the membership. And so I wanted to share this with you as an example of not just the communities where you serve, which I know is a focus of this conference today, but also your own community and the diversity within it, and how as practitioners of our expertise, regardless of what it is, how do we center ourselves around that idea of inclusion and belonging? When we focus on diversity, and especially the numbers of diversity without the moving forward through to inclusion and belonging, we can sometimes get stuck on the numbers. And I come to you with my own experiences tonight, and experiences as an Aboriginal woman, as a former educator, as a former public servant who got to represent Australia from abroad twice, who now gets to bring those experiences to bear in a purpose-led technology organisation who really makes our investments in the technology that we use and that we develop and that we sell through the lens of what's the benefit to society. And so we have our purpose statement, which is here, to make the world more sustainable by building trust in society through innovation. Now, on the left bottom corner, there's a framework there that we use to talk about our purpose. And while there's many, many categories in there, we're not going to get a chance to talk about all of them tonight. But what it does is provide one way of thinking through all of the complexities of an organization and what we must come to terms with when we find our purpose and how we operationalize that. So as the QJA thinks about its mission and its vision and its values, how does it turn that into an inclusive practice environment is where the rubber hits the road. So I wanted to call out not necessarily the framework, because at some point in the future, if you haven't already, you'll develop your own inclusion strategy and you'll gather all of this great thought partnership that you've had through your conference and work out how you actually turn that into practice. What I've learned through my 20 plus years of working in this space is that leadership is the first step. And when you have good leadership, that turns into creating the space to have policy. So best practice policy, it's a journey. You're not going to get there. No one gets there overnight. It's also, there's no such thing as perfection. The whole idea about best practice is that it continues to iterate, and best practice from 5 years ago is not going to be the best practice in 5 years' time. And once you have the leadership that recognizes that and the policies that are able to iterate, then your organization has to develop practices and processes. And this is where I see, as I talk to other organizations around how they're going on their inclusion journey, that really people are requiring or asking for more guidance. Even in the processes, you can have good processes that might, ask the right questions, tick the right boxes, appear to be inclusive, but the practice, the everyday way that decisions are made, isn't necessarily as inclusive as it could be, despite having the leadership, the policy, and the processes. It's the practice which actually creates the environment. And when we think about culture, culture is not necessarily something that can be defined, because it is both observed and experienced. And so as we think about the culture that we want to create, an inclusive culture, it's the practices that define the decision makings that can really make a difference. I wanted to drill down a little bit for you around how we as Fujitsu focus on inclusion. So I'm not going to talk about the statistics, because in your QJA Autumn 2023 magazine, there was a great article in there that actually talked a lot about the what and the why of inclusion, and especially through the lens of the Australian demographic shifts that have been happening. For me, it's a little bit more proactive than that. It's about how do we position ourselves as individuals, as leaders, as organizational policy and decision makers to really take the front foot around creating inclusive environments. At Fujitsu, we do that through our inclusion bill, which you can see on the right-hand side. And we focus on specific areas that we'd like to increase our inclusive focus on. So you'll see there's 5 areas in here. It's wrapped by equity. So we recognize that because of society and history, not everyone is starting from the same place at the same time. And that sometimes we have to position ourselves to be equitable, to create equality. And if we do not do those things, then people won't feel included. And then ultimately that core, that center of belonging, which we talk about being completely you, cannot be achieved. So this is our organizational framework around how we focus our inclusion practice and the areas that we focus on. Every organization is going to be different. I'm not suggesting this framework will work for the QJA, but I wanted to share it with you because it helps have people see something. So often people, when they connect with a concept, they want to see what that concept looks like in a graphic. And for us, this particular inclusion wheel has really helped us focus not just our internal people, so the people that work within Fujitsu, but also our partners on our areas of inclusion focus. And so for each of these areas, so for LGBTI+, we have both an inclusive internal working group. So we have people who are both identify as being a part of that group and who are allies of that group joined together in a working group. And these working groups come up with process and policy and practice suggestions to help inform the leadership of the organization about how we can be doing better to be inclusive. And the reason I mention these internal working groups is because of the comment on the left, which is often people view the experience of others through their own lens rather than through the lived experience of those that are trying to be included. So imagine as a people leader in an organization, I identify as a straight woman. So it would be difficult for me to understand the lived experience of my LGBTI+ colleagues. So it's really important for us as an organization, as we want to be more inclusive and make sure that our organization has the policy, process, and practice settings. For us as an organization, we need to hear directly from the communities that we want to include. And so that's why we have these internal employee working groups to inform us, and those working groups are made of both of who identify within the group and also allies. But also we recognize that we don't know what we don't know, and nobody has the answers. Nobody can do everything on their own, and that we have to create a community of purpose and a community of practice. And so we do that through the lens of being able to create external partnerships. So for each of these inclusion groups, we have at least 2 external non-profit organizations that are experts in serving those communities, especially, and have developed their own frameworks around inclusion. And so we partner with those organizations. So for example, Wendy mentioned in the introduction that Fujitsu have been endorsed as an Australian Workplace Equality Index Gold Employer. So that's a really good example of doing the work as an organization to be inclusive of diverse communities. That community is specifically focused on the LGBTI plus community, and every year we have to show all of the things. So from the leadership, so how does the CEO talk about LGBTI community inside the organization, outside the organization? What are our policies? How do we have processes that are supportive? It can be something as simple as in our parental leave policy being explicit about including surrogacy. For example, for LGBTI plus people, surrogacy is one of the most common pathways to parenthood. But in our parental leave policy up until 2 years ago, we didn't explicitly say this parental leave policy is inclusive of surrogacy. One word, adding one word to our parental leave policy told people who were from the LGBTI community that they were being included in our parental leave. This explicit approach to inclusion is super powerful because what we know is that people who come from historically excluded or underserved communities, of which the ones on the screen are typically, like if you drill down into the experiences of these communities, there are many ways that people are excluded, and historically policies have not been designed for inclusion for those groups. The people that live in these communities often read themselves out of a policy if they are not explicitly named inside those policies. So as an organization, we have done the work on our policies and our processes to make sure that we are explicitly inclusive of particular groups. So this is just a little framework for you to think about how to just do some minor adjustments to the settings of the things that you already have that are already working to be more inclusive, to help people feel like they belong by explicitly including them in the journey. So tonight I want to talk about trust, as trust is the framework that we use at Fujitsu to underpin how we partner with diverse communities as externally as well as internally. But I want to feature 2 particular partnerships tonight that we're really proud of, because when you base your approach to partnership with communities around trust, you start from a point of where the community is at. So we take the position that when we use trust as our central value for our engagement, that we start our engagement at where the community is. And by starting where the community is, then we start from a position of listening and a partnership paradigm around doing with rather than doing for. And when you do with the community, then you meet and serve the community where they are with what they need in a way that they need it. Then you also start with a principle of moving at the pace of trust. And this might be familiar with you. Moving at the pace of trust is not a new idea, but coupled with starting where the community is at, moving with the pace of trust allows you to move forward with the community step in step, so in lockstep. And when you do that, and when you recognize that if you don't have an investment that's based on trust, the damage that can be caused by that, then you center yourself in a way that allows the community to lead with you, so that it's not that old style, perhaps, patriarchal, to use that word in that way, but that knowing what's best for someone or for a community, it's really centering yourself as a servant of the communities that you want to include. So I have 2 short videos that I wanted to share with you. This one This first one here is around a partnership with one of our major customers, Woolworths. So Fujitsu, when you walk into a Woolworths supermarket, actually also Coles, but this partnership is with Woolworths. The IT, the technology that helps you do your shopping and shop and check out is Fujitsu technology. And maybe the next time you go to the supermarket as you're checking out, just have a look around. You might see the Fujitsu logo there on the checkout. This is really important because it's an example of the requirement for digital literacy to be a part of everyone's life. If you don't know how to use the EFTPOS machine, it's kind of hard to do groceries unless you have cash. How do you get cash? Well, there's not necessarily lots of banks around anymore. You have to know how to use the ATM. All of these things require digital literacy. So for students who have physical and cognitive disabilities, the basic life skills of being able to go to the supermarket and the literacy and numeracy skills of being able to work a cash register, a modern digital cash register, and the EFTPOS machine were things that had been identified by the community of people living with disabilities, and particularly for students, as something that required some really good attention. So we did an innovative partnership with Woolies and with schools who serve students with disabilities, and I just wanted to share this really great video about what that experience is like for those students. So if everything goes well and the technology goes well, hopefully you'll be able to hear this. This is my only concern, because sometimes the technology does not be my friend. Wendy, can you let me know if the sound does not come through on your end?
Sure.
Have you got it?
Yeah, there's no there's no sound, Nicole. So we'll just, what we need to do
Yes.
is if we stop sharing for a second,
Yep.
and then reshare, and it'll give you the option at the bottom of the screen to share sound,
Right.
and optimize for a video clip. See how that goes.
Try one more time.
We've got sound.
Shopping Awards. See you next time. Hello, everyone. My name is Kira Mishania. I have Williams syndrome, and I am your ambassador for awards and for teacher mini stores.
As a father of a child with a disability, my daughter now works in Woolies, and she enjoys going in, and she understands how things operate in a supermarket. We take that all for granted. Many people don't understand the logic there. To those who struggle with that concept, it's an amazing difference. People open up and ask about people with disabilities. I say, do yourself a favor. If you haven't, go out of your way to meet a person with disabilities. I guarantee you, spend a little time with someone with a disability, and you will have a richer, more experience from that, and give them the same one.
What I love about that video is the impact that it has on the students with disabilities, on their confidence, on their ability to have the life skills that they need to be independent, and the literacy and numeracy skills to actually go on to have jobs. This project started through this collaboration 3 years ago, and has been so successful that there are now more than 50 mini Woolies on the East Coast in schools that serve students with disabilities, in job placement and training agencies that serve adults with disabilities. And last month, we opened our first one on a New South Wales TAFE campus. The model is one of centering the community that we want to include at the beginning, the middle, and the end of the experience and the design process, while building training and experience programs that are fit for purpose for inclusion of those particular communities. So we as an organisation feel that this kind of commitment is part of the investment that we make as a technology company in the types of technology that we create. To have our business as usual be adapted for this particular model really showed us that living our purpose to create a more sustainable, and that's its biggest sustainable, not just environmental sustainable, but sustainable for all. By being an inclusive environment, so that trust piece, by using our innovation. So as a technology company, the opportunity to bring forth our day-to-day business as usual with one of our major customers like Woolies and use it through the lens of inclusion, for us is really living our purpose in practice. It then laid the foundation for an even more ambitious program. I'm not sure about how many people on the call know where Cherbourg is, but Cherbourg is a discrete Aboriginal local government area, which is 3.5 hours north of Brisbane. You may know it as a mission, which is what it was when it was created in 1904, which the kind of mission system has moved on. It's a discrete community now where around 2,000 Aboriginal people from many different First Nations across Queensland, the Torres Strait and northern New South Wales were moved onto this land over a period of time between 1904 and the 1960s. Cherbourg, as a community, has lacked corporate investment. It's an hour away from Gympie, the closest major commercial centre, and it had suffered from a lack of investment and a lack of focus. And the community themselves were really keen to be able to harness in the kind of mid to post-COVID era, what they saw as their opportunity for a true digital inclusion, because that idea that geography was no longer a barrier to success. And the community themselves started their digital transformation long before Fujitsu met them. And they started with a project to take the recycling. So you might remember some time ago that Australian recycling was no longer able to be processed offshore. And so the Cherbourg community saw an opportunity to take the recycling from the local shire councils around the Cherbourg community, so in the Wide Bay Burnett area, and build a material recycling facility, a sorting facility, and process those materials and sell them on. And so the MRF, as it's called, the Materials Recycling Facility project was started, and they were using digital technology to sort the recycling, which makes it quicker and more effective. So when Fujitsu was introduced to the Cherbourg community 2 years ago, we already saw that they had started their own journey of digital transformation, and we said, wow, what can we do with this community who are driven to digitally transform, but who have not had the opportunity to have commercial and corporate investment? And so in partnership with the Queensland Government and the Queensland TAFE and the Cherbourg Shire Council and the Cherbourg Elders and community, we developed a collaborative project to take a service that Fujitsu had already been providing to one of our customers and create a new business, a small business in Cherbourg, with Cherbourg Digital Technology Trust, which is owned, staffed, and managed by people from the Cherbourg community. And what Fujitsu did with the community and the TAFE and the council and the Queensland government is donated the equipment to set up an IT help desk. I mean, we call it a service center, but basically when our customers, so we provide IT services to thousands of corporate customers. We're a business to business organization, not business to consumer. So our customers, like Australia Post, have their IT help desk calls answered by Fujitsu. And so we approached Australia Post and said, we have an idea. You have a commitment to First Nations engagement and to rural and remote community engagement. We'd like to help Cherbourg set up their own IT help desk, and we'd like Australia Post to be the first customer. Australia Post agreed, and 15 months ago now, so it's over a year, we've celebrated our first year anniversary. Fujitsu donated the equipment to the Cherbourg community and the training to take people from base level of digital literacy all the way through to being able to answer IT help desk calls for the Australia Post customer set. And Fujitsu pays the small business in Cherbourg to answer those calls on behalf of Australia Post, on behalf of Fujitsu. So my next video, that's what I want to do. These are the 3 principles that I mentioned earlier that I had a slide on, but it was out of sequence. There we go. Just a reminder, so meeting people where they are, that's really the value of empathy. Moving at the speed of trust, so placing yourself alongside and interlocking with the communities that you want to include. And then finally, aspiration. So doing better, being better, and recognizing that there's a cost to not investing in the trust. And so these 3 values are really embedded in the community collaboration with Cherbourg, and the way that we make decisions about how that collaboration operates. And so I'd like to share the Cherbourg video with you as I wrap up and see if you've got any questions for me. This is what we think of as inclusive practice when we take our business as usual and say we've got a service that we provide to our customer. How do we use this business as usual service in an innovative way? How do we use our technology in an innovative way to help include communities who have historically been unincluded, to help transform them, with them, alongside them, in the ways that they want to transform by creating self-determination and economic participation in societies in ways that this community in particular had not had an opportunity before. So let's see if that audio continues to work for us.
Garu Nara Yumban, on behalf of the Waka Waka people, I want to welcome everybody today.
A lot of good jobs that people are trying to get are basically outside of community, and no one wants to leave their hometown to get employment, and it's also flexible hours.
The call centre in Cherbourg is pretty big. We don't have to go anywhere. It's based in Cherbourg, community based. It's our own business.
It is so exciting because that opens up more job opportunities for our mob and more training, and even it can go into leadership and management.
And we want to really see it rise to where we can see the next 5 generations step on board with this too and keep it going.
And just a great opportunity for community to have.
The success of the Cherbourg Digital Technology Trust has meant that after the first year, we took the 8 existing agents and have been able to expand the new cohort. The next generation of service desk analysts are currently doing their boot camp, and there are 20 people lined up for the expanded call centre. So we're really pleased to have been able to collaborate on that. So in summary, I want to say thank you for the opportunity to be with you here tonight to share in our journey around how we use inclusion to help bring together stronger communities, and to value and respect the diversity and the value that that diversity brings from many different places, ways of being, knowing and doing, to bring value to us. So thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Nicole. That was great, and some fabulous corporate social responsibility being exercised there. It's some great programs. We one of our sessions we had a organisation called the Orca Project, and they do kind of work training and stuff for kids in between, like who have left school that have disabilities. And so it's sort of similar to your mini Woolworths project. It's a very similar thing. And so folks, I'd like to really thank our presenters tonight. I think they've really stayed on topic. Lesley, like your work in Papua New Guinea is awesome. It very much embodies that idea of going to where people are, because you certainly did that, Wesley, without your feet and without your shoes, and cars being pushed through mud, and going out to those communities and actually helping them to build, similar to Nicole's project in Cherbourg, where it's not about being kind of paternalistic. It's about helping people to learn to stand on their own feet, and that's how communities are built. And Corey's presentation is how to kind of what happens when those communities suffer major events, and the importance of that real kind of first aid, emergency treatment, when something really bad happens, and the groups that come together in a very practical way. And Dragana, the services that Multilink are providing for people to, take advantage of, or utilise the services of JPs when they need them for the many, many different things that they do, and many different life events and transactions that have to be that involve the JP, witnessing a document, So it's been a great session, and thank you to all of you for giving up your Saturday evening to talk to us. And that kind of wraps up our 2023 conference. And I think we've just to kind of summarise all of our sessions. I'm just going to flick over to a little diagram here. And this diagram is basically it's an electronic version of the scribbles that we did on a whiteboard when we set out to organise this conference, and when we were talking about communities and diversity. We started with the community right in the middle here, and it's like it's kind of a window that we look through, and so what this is our 4 different sessions. A really diverse and robust and resilient community requires all of those elements. It requires, first of all, those local heroes, and we've met so many of them during our conference. We've had people from Lions, we had Rosies who are going out and doing the homeless outreaches. We had Jay Larkin from the Brisbane Paralympic football program that is getting, disabled kids involved in sport and building their confidence. And then we had Brian, who was coming to us from Roma and, talking to the challenges of, being a JP out in a regional community and that tyranny of distance. And then we also met with Amiel, who was himself a refugee and did all of his schooling in refugee camps, and came out and served his community in the Logan area. And Lom, who was from the Matu Chi community, which is a ethnic minority from Myanmar. And I think one of the things that he said was, that volunteering is a way that communities and really kind of integrate. It's a way for new Australians to integrate with the rest of, with mainstream society and get into the groove. And Kenny, of course, spoke to language and understanding being important factors, and Ali Kadri talked about the Muslim community and, kind of how great it would be to go where people are, which was something that Nicole also repeated, and Lesley also going out to, you know, PNG to do those things, not trying to do them remotely from here in Australia, actually being on the ground. And we met with Orca, who do the, you know, deal with the young disabled adults and getting them work skills, and in a lot of cases getting them work. And Vinnie's, of course, who are out there helping people in really dire and desperate sort of circumstances. And then we finished up tonight with talking about connecting. So it's all of those elements that come through to build our diverse community. And it's been a fabulous conference, and we've just met so many interesting people, but there's been some consistent themes. Our Chief Justice started by talking about the need to be culturally aware, and it kind of fits in with what Nicole said about empathy, and then building trust and having aspiration, you know, and certainly our local heroes. So many wonderful people out there that are doing so much for the community is certainly very aspirational and inspirational. You know, the way that we can pull together, it's a real kind of Aussie thing, isn't it? You know, that we're out there to, you know, we're going to help where we can. Whether you're born here or born somewhere else, whether you speak English, whether you don't. You know, so going to where the people are, being those local heroes, just being in there and helping, you know, not feeling sympathy, but having that empathy. You know, it's just really, really inspiring to speak to all those community leaders. There's a nice little chatty comments coming through. So I'm going to call it a wrap, and I'm going to hand over to Brooke Batley, our QJA president, to close our conference for 2023. Over to you, Brooke.
Thanks, Wendy. At the outset, I'd like to, as other people have, begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting, and I'd also like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. As Wendy said, and I'm probably going to repeat some of the things that she said, but our conference theme has been our diverse community. And there are 4 subgroups, which again, Wendy said, we covered local heroes, understanding, helping and connecting. Each of the speakers in all of these sessions presented a snapshot of their activities across those subgroups. The talks were informative, thought-provoking, and hopefully have helped highlight the problems faced by many individuals in their quest for an inclusive and better life. Additionally, that we, as JPs and CDEX, gain a better understanding of the challenges faced by these groups regarding their assimilation into our society, which to many people is alien and confronting. On behalf of QJA, I would like to thank each of the speakers for their contribution to our conference, and my thanks also to the organising committee of the Brisbane South and Logan branches for the huge effort required managing this conference. Thank you.
Thanks, Brooke, and thank you again to all of our wonderful speakers and presenters and our audience, of course. We are recording the sessions, so we will send you the links. I have the last 3 sessions loaded up in YouTube. We will send you the links to the sessions if you missed any of them or you want to revisit them, as well as links to the community organisations who have presented. And if you want to contact them directly in regard to either making a financial contribution or, you know, offering your services either as a JP or in other ways that you can volunteer, or just to provide out more information. So wrapping up for 2023, and we hope to see you all in person next year. Better luck. So keep your eyes out. We will be sending a survey out to you to help us, you know, consider and organise a live in face-to-face event in Brisbane for 2024. And don't forget that you will be receiving a survey on this session, so we'd like to get your feedback. And again, thank you to the presenters, thank you to you, thank you to all the wonderful people who've joined us from all over Queensland, and I wish you a very happy Saturday evening, and we look forward to seeing you next year. Thank you again.